So how do we save an image and use it in one of our web pages? Well, to do that, we'll need to use a new element, a new tag called the image tag. And you can see what the image tag looks like here. We use the familiar notation here. We use a less than symbol, img, and then a greater than symbol. To make life as easy as possible for you here, make sure that the image you're going to use and the HTML file are both in the same location. Put them in the same folder. Although you don't actually have to do that when it comes to web pages on the internet when they're used for real. But just in these simple examples, make sure they're in the same place, inside the same folder. So we're going to use that image tag. Now the problem is, of course, how does the browser interpret that image tag to know which particular image you want to use? Now the way that we change the way that a tag behaves is to use these things that are called attributes. We change the attributes of the tag. And the way that we define attributes is to use things wrapped up in double quotes. So let's have a look at an example of the image tag. Here it is. So here's a particular attribute for the image tag that's called source. And source is abbreviated to src. And what we do is we're going to give source a value. So you can read this aloud as saying the image tag has an attribute, and the attribute for this particular image tag is for the source of the image, and we go src equals, and then we have a value. In this instance, we have a value and we wrap it up in double quotes, and the value here is banner.gif. And what we do is we put whatever the file name is between the double quotes. So in the example in a moment, you'll see it's an image file called flash.png. So of course, that means you do need to know the extension because you've got to include it in the file name. Now this tag is an example of an element that doesn't need a starting tag and a closing tag, sort of start and end tag. It's a single tag. Often these are called empty elements, but it's not a phrase that I'm going to use much. And what you can see is we actually close the tag, the single tag, by putting a / at the end. So I'll say that again. Rather than have an opening and a closing tag, it's just one tag. It doesn't really need an opening and a closing thing. And inside the tag, what we do is we add an attribute, and the particular attribute that we're going to use here is to include an image called banner.gif, and we put whatever that file name is for that image goes between those double quotes. So let's have a look at an actual example. So here I've got a file called imageexample.html. I'll just briefly run through it again just to remind you. We've got, it's an HTML file, so there are HTML tags at the top and the bottom. We have a head, we have a body. If you look in the head, you can see we have a title tag and it says text with an image. Let's move down into the body of the document, and of course in the body, this is the place where we place the content that will be visible inside the browser window. And you can see that we've got 3 tags. We've got a paragraph. Here is an added image, and you can see I've got an opening tag and a closing tag to wrap up the paragraph. And then I've got our image tag. And our image tag here is going to point at an image that's called flash.png. So you can see we've got src equals flash.png. And it's very important that you use the double quotes, and often students sometimes they type in scr and then the browser doesn't understand what that actually means. It's source, so it's src. Then we've got a third line here inside the body, which is another paragraph. So you can see that image tag is there in the middle. So what happens if we actually bring that up in a browser window? Well, it looks like this. So you can see we've got the paragraph at the top. Here is the added image. The image is inserted at the point where we place the image tag. So you can see here it's brought up the image. And then we've got another paragraph at the bottom which says some text here. Now obviously you can have as many images as you like and you can place them wherever you wish. Everything has to be inside the body of the HTML document. Now source is one attribute for the image tag, but there are other attributes. And if you want to add attributes, you do them like this, you always have pairs, so it's always something equals something. And you can just space them out, so it's something equals something, and then a space, something equals something, and then a space. You need to separate them with at least one space. And more formally, we would say, we have an attribute and we give it a value. Now, the tags that are used with, so the attributes that are used with different tags vary. And to find them out, you use a reference. They're online, there are HTML books. I think it's important to note that, not everybody remembers all the attributes or all the tags. And so the skill here is in not necessarily sort of remembering these things, but making sure that you know where to look. I don't know, but I know where to look. So you go, oh, well, I'll pull out the HTML book and I can look up the image tag and I can see what the attributes are. And this is an example from the 5th edition of the HTML book from O'Reilly. And you can see, if you look, it says function, and then underneath the attributes, there's a whole bunch of attributes there that we can use. Now, we're not going to memorize those, we're not going to use all of those, we'll just use a couple of those. We tend to use a couple of those. So, for example, here are 3 common ones that we might use: alt, border, and align. So what alt does is it's the text that will be displayed if the image isn't available. And also, if somebody is partially sighted, they can use a browser which will actually read the alt tag aloud, whatever the text is that we place in that gap. There's a border attribute. What that does is that places a nice border around the image, and we can specify how wide that border will actually be. And then there's a line, and what a line does is it indicates should the image be placed in a particular way, on the left, on the right, in the middle, for example, compared to the surrounding text. So, quick example here. Let's edit the file and let's add in some other attributes. So, as I've indicated, the way that we do that is we use a space to separate the attributes, and it's always something equals something, attribute equals value. So we've got source equals flash.png. As you can see, I've added in 2 extra attributes here. I've added in the alt, so that's the text that will appear if the picture isn't available. So I've just got picture of drive here. And then I've added a border. We'll talk a bit about sizes and measures later on, but right now I'm just going to go border equals 1. And if you type that in and you actually bring it up inside a browser window, this is what it would look like. So you can see, if you look at the border of the image, there's that fine 1 point border all the way around the image. And we can't see the alt text, but it would be there if the image wasn't available for some reason. Now what you could do is you could type that in and you could try it, and it's worthwhile just trying to change the value of the border. In other words, try a border of 2 or 5 or 10 and reload the image into the browser and have a look and see what it looks like. The other thing you could do is you could simply temporarily remove the image from that folder and bring the page up again, and hopefully you should be able to see at that point that the text appears, picture of drive, because the image isn't available.